Hi, I'm Scott Goldfine, welcoming you to another edition of Truth in Rhythm, brought to you by funkinstuff.net. This is an interview show that gets deep into the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. Whether you're watching the video broadcast on YouTube or at funkinstuff.net or through other providers, or listening to the audio podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or from many other providers, thank you so much as always for your continued interest and support in this program. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome to the Truth in Rhythm Command Center bassist and composer Rodney "Skeet" Curtis, who has spent more than 40 years holding down the bottom for Parliament, Funkadelic, and associated acts. Among the all-time classics, his bass virtuosity can be heard on our Parliament's Motor Booty Affair, Funkadelic's One Nation Under a Groove, The Brides of Funkenstein's Never Buy a Texas from a Cowboy, the P-Funk All-Stars live at the Beverly Theater, and George Clinton's The Awesome Power of a Fully Operational Mothership. He has also played with drummer Dennis Chambers and been a longtime sideman for funk saxophonist Maceo Parker. Skeet, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I have one addition for you.
Okay.
The Brides of Funkenstein, well, two actually. Brides of Funkenstein, Funko Walk, and Parlette, their first record.
Yeah. No, my intent was that it includes that, but you do have done much more definitely.
The P-Funk universe, right?
Yeah, from like 78 on.
Right. 70, well, my first recording was 78, but 77 is when I joined.
Very cool. Where are you coming to us from today, Skeet?
I'm at home in my little piece of a studio here outside of Baltimore. One of the rare times I get to spend at home. So I'm very glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. I had to hunt you down a little bit. You were so busy going all over Europe, you know?
Yeah, a little bit.
Glad you're back stateside.
Mm-hmm.
So
what can I do for you?
Let's go way back. All right, you ready to go into those memory banks a bit?
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about how you first got into music as a kid and what drew you to the bass.
You will never believe this story. I had to be, for the sake of argument, let's call it 12 years old. I lived in a kind of depressed neighborhood, not kind of, the projects. At any rate, they had like a 25-cent theater that, my family and friends, we'd all go to. So we all trekked up to this theater. And the movie was Your Cheating Heart, which was the Hank Williams Sr. story. So I'm watching this movie, he plays guitar and everything. And the thing, you have to remember when this was. This is the 60s. So, and at the very end of the movie, he was on his way to a concert. He stopped off at like some gas station, and he's sitting on like the little porch drinking Coke and just playing music with the black guys, and he passed. And that kind of touched me some kind of way, the kind of the racial harmony, in the midst of what was actually going on in the world at that time. So, and that's what made me want to play guitar. But my hands, they were this size when I was 12. So, I couldn't really work my way around the guitar too much. So I kind of played on the 4 strings, of the guitar, and just kind of fooled around and played bass and went on from there. And, years later, by the way, George Hamilton starred in that. And years later, when I was with P-Funk, I met him in Las Vegas. And I told him that story. I said, "You are responsible for this." He got a chuckle. We laughed, and that was it. But yeah, that's it. George Hamilton, You're Cheating Heart.
George Hamilton. He's got one of the best hands ever.
Is that what that is? Okay.
Always with the white teeth and the yeah. So.
And I had friends, in fact, my babysitter, her boyfriend then, which is now her husband, He played. You ever hear of a group called Frankie and the Spindles? A singing group from around here. At any rate, they were pretty big, and he played bass. And he was, they were very nice to me. He was very, very kind, and to this day, I consider him a friend. And he kind of mentored me in my earlier years of not knowing what I was doing. So, I thank God for people like that, actually. Because where I grew up, it could have gone either way. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So.
And you grew up in what area exactly?
It was called Lexington Terrace Projects. There were a bunch of tall buildings. My building was 11 stories. So that's 11 stories tall, 10 apartments on each floor. So that's a lot of people. And a lot of those apartments they were multi-families, well, not multi, but extended families. So that's a lot of people. And there were 2, 3, 5 of those buildings kind of right around in my area.
And how big was your family?
Well, at that time, it was my mother's sister and I, my grandmother, my grandfather, and my mother's youngest brother, my uncle. So it was the 3 of us, my mother, me, and my sister, and the 3 of them, so 6 of us. So that was, for then, that was a small family, in a whatever it was, 3-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartment, something like that. It was, it was comfortable. I mean, I didn't know we were poor until later, until I told myself we were poor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So, it was cool.
It's just daily life when you're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how did things evolve through your teens with music, and what music were you really into?
Well, early on, I was into fusion and rock, basically. And, when I say rock, I mean rock, not rock and roll, rock. But there came a period when there was a jazz rock fusion, Yes, King Crimson, groups like that. And I was really into that stuff. I used to play everything, really, really fast and a lot of notes. That was me. I was really into it. But there came a point, I forget, I played with a singing group at some point called the Castells. Actually, the first money I ever made in music was with that group. And that, you play behind a singing group, you got to slow things down a bit, or they'll really get in your case. So I learned to slow down a little bit. And through that's kind of where I found the groove. And once I found it, I was like, this is pretty good. I don't have to play 1,000 notes. I can, play right in here. Everybody seems to be into it. So I think this is what I want to do. And that's how I started playing what then was maybe soul becoming funk. You know what I mean? So.
About how old were you then?
I was probably 14. And I joined that band when I was 13. I was probably there a year. And that rhythm section split off to become a group called Hot Ice. We were very self-contained. It was, a rhythm section, a singer, and that was it. That was the band. And then we merged with a group that had horns. And they were Uncle Remus. And we were Hot Ice. So our rhythm section and their horn section became a newer version of Uncle Remus. And I played with them for years until I went with P-Funk. So, and in that band was Dennis Chambers, you know who he is, Greg Thomas, who plays with P-Funk now, Kevin Oliver, who plays with P-Funk now. And, so by that time, we were playing a lot of P-Funk covers. And I kind of discovered that's me. That's what I want to play. And, Dennis and I kind of, we're walking along, then we kind of, musically, he decided he wanted to stay with the fusion and stuff, but I wanted to stay with the funk and stuff. So, we played in P-Funk for a few years, and then we kind of Still best of friends and all of that, but we just musically, kind of diverged.
Mhm.
So
And did you feel comfortable right away up on stage, or did it take a while for you to kind of,
with P-Funk,
no, before when you first started?
oh no, I was always, what you see now is that's how I've always been. I kind of, I'm sure I look like I don't want to say non-committal to what I'm playing, but I look somewhat disinterested. But that's the headspace I have to put myself in. You know what I mean? So I have to say, to you, it looks like I'm just sitting there almost asleep. But inside my head is, that's what's going on. You know what I'm saying? So I have to put myself in the headspace to play. Because I don't really play, my style is not really mapped out. I kind of react to what's going on. And that's why I'm so good for Maceo, probably, and George at the time. Because he pretty much gave me a free reign. Do what you do. And Maceo does the same thing because I react well to the environment. So, and I gotta kind of get in the space to do that.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting to hear you describe that.
Yeah.
So when you started getting into funk, though, and you had what seemed to be almost like a farm system for P-Funk, with the four of you, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
What were some bass players, that you were looking up to at that point? Was it just sort of the usual cats like, Stanley Clarke or Larry Graham and people like that? Or
Well, going way back, probably first it was Jamerson more than anybody, and years later I kind of figured out that my style is a lot like his, a modern version of it, but I was so influenced by him that I still play that way, although you have to really listen to hear it. But when I hear myself on playback, it's like, oh yeah, that's kind of Jamerson-esque. You know what I'm saying? But early on it was him. Then Larry Graham, of course. Who, when I met him, I was actually starstruck. I couldn't believe it. He more than anybody, I was actually starstruck when I met him, which is probably 70. I want to say 8. I couldn't even speak. I was like mesmerized. And now when we see each other, it's like, hey, what's up? Da da da. We talking and it's on and on. But so that would be Jamerson, Larry Graham, then of course the Stanleys and the Jackos and that bunch, Miroslav Vitos, all those guys. So yeah, I have my jazz influences and then my funk influences. I considered Funk Brothers. I considered Jamerson funk. So Jamerson, Graham, my funk influences, the heaviest, and then Stanley and Jocko, my jazz influences, with other people sprinkled in it as well, but those are the basic ones. And now, there's Victor and Marcus kind of on the opposite sides of that fence too.
Did you ever end up having any formal training, or it was all self-taught
No,
and mentored?
self-taught. So I figured out, I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. And then I tried to really knuckle down and get some proper training. But by then I was already Rodney Skeet Curtis. I kind of had my vision for what I should sound like, and I wasn't trying to hear, what anybody had to say at that point. I was in my 20s. What do I care about what anybody says? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, right.
I got to a point where.
I'm sorry. Where and when did you get the Skeet nickname?
Skeet, my grandfather, when I was born.
Oh.
He's like, man, from what my mother said, that boy looked just like a mosquito. And that's how it started. Mosquito to Skeeter, Skeet. So that's always been that. Everybody who really knows me calls me Skeet. Anybody that calls me Rodney doesn't really know me, except for Gary Scheider. He always called me Rodney. And Benny Cowan from P-Funk, he always calls me Rodney. Other than that, everybody calls me Skeet.
So you had these influences. How did you go about trying to make it all your own though, and have your own distinctive voice?
Well, early on, I found sax players very interesting because when I started, bass wasn't out front. You know, the cats were killing, but it was like down in the mix, way in the back. And sax players were up in your face. So I tried to play kind of like sax players early on. And then through that, you know, during, you know, my career, there came a point when bass players, you know, with the Grahams and of the world, bass players started, you know, to get out front a bit. And so I would, once that happened, I kind of had to suppress the sax part and kind of become more bassy. And I would like, Graham is a heavy influence. But as I told him this story, I didn't want to see him playing before I tried to figure out how he played. And I always play with my thumb some kind of way, you know, if it was like this or, you know, not this so much, but, you know, kind of as a third or a fifth finger, basically. So, but when I wish I had a pick here. When I heard him, I thought I had a pick like in between these two fingers, like this. So I would thumb like that and then take this pick between these two fingers. That's how I thought he was doing it. And then I saw him and I said, man, that's so much easier. You know what I mean? And I had never considered that that's what he was doing, you know, the plucking. And so but I was already playing with the pick, so I developed a certain style with that. I didn't want to change it, so I just incorporated what I saw with what I thought I heard, you know what I mean? And that kind of became my style. And, you know, my fingering, I try to be precise with it. So I got the Skeet's version of precise fingering, plus the Skeet's version of what Graham did. And you know, then you put the Jocko in there and the Stanley and the Jamerson and everybody I've ever heard in my life is in there somewhere. You know, from some guy playing on a corner to Victor Wooten in front of 20,000 people. You know, somebody's in there somewhere. So, and I kind of incorporated it, but I tried to, over the years, I tried to stay true to, you know, my own style pretty much. I didn't want to incorporate what Graham did to the point where, you know, I sound like I'm trying to imitate him. I just want to pay homage to what he does, but not imitate him. And that, I just, and all of that is what kind of made my style.
Yeah, so you assimilate all these important influences and distill it in your own voice.
Exactly.
But it's so interesting. I hear so many stories about, you know, musicians trying to emulate like a different instrument or trying to figure something out on their own, and that so often leads to innovation or creating your own flavor. You know.
Exactly. And you know, I'm thankful that I chose that path rather than I'm going to sit in this room and I'm not coming out until I sound like Larry Graham or whoever. You know, I'm not leaving until I do. I chose my path rather than that. A lot of younger players now, well, there's YouTube and, you know, somebody 12 years old can sound like Victor Wooten. The problem with that is there's already a Victor Wooten. And unless it's the U band, you know, you can't work playing like Victor Wooten. You know, only Victor Wooten can be Victor Wooten. There's only one. So, you know, they don't develop their thing so much as try to emulate what they see and hear. And that's fine to a point, but at some point you have to show some kind of individuality if that makes sense to you.
Otherwise you're just a copyist and not a creative. Yeah.
You might be the greatest Victor Wooten sounding guy on earth, but there's already a Victor Wooten.
Yeah.
And I like to say, you know, people, you know, when you do this, you do that. I say, well, actually, you know, I've had a lot of years practicing to be a pretty good Rodney Skeet Curtis. So, I'll stick with that pretty much. And I've had, as you said, a very long, 40 plus year career. I'm good. I'm very happy playing the kind of music that I play, and people seem to like it. So I play with, when it comes down to it, my professional career has been two bands, P-Funk and Maceo, 20 years each. 20 years each, and I'm very happy about it. So, I don't have to strain my brain trying to learn other music.
And I'm going to do a little show and tell here.
Yeah, that's me.
So that was the first one, I believe. But tell us.
That's the first release. I recorded a bunch of stuff before that came out. Yeah.
First release, Parlet in 1978. So tell us, though, Skeet, the series of events that led to you connecting with P-Funk and becoming part of the funk mob.
That's interesting as well. If you know the history of P-Funk, like in the mid to late 70s, like right after Mothership Connection, but before Flashlight, the Parliament part of P-Funk were going to split out. They became, whatever they became later, but they split out. And Gary Cooper, from Bootsy, we grew up together. We went to the same high school, all of that. Grady Thomas was going to put a band together. And Gary Cooper put me in touch with Grady Thomas. So now I'm going to play with him. I'm thrilled right there, right? I'm 20 years old, right? So I go down to Atlanta for these rehearsals. And living in Atlanta at that time is Ray Davis from Parliament and Gary Scheider from Parliament Funkadelic. So they're kind of sitting around at rehearsal one day, and I see Gary Scheider get this look on his face like, man, this dude is pretty good. So I think, well, I confirmed it years later, but he went back and told George, you might want to try to listen to this bass player that Grady has. And as luck would have it, well, bad luck, good luck, depending on which side you're on, I had a kind of falling out with Grady's manager at the time. And I went home. So I'm home. I'm going back to civil engineering, which is what I did. And I'm very happy to do it. I'm done with this. I'm going home. So I get home. I'm probably home, I want to say 3-4 days. Gary Cooper calls me up. What you doing? I'm chilling. Said, you want to come up to Detroit and record with George? I said, like, George who? That's where I'm at. And I have no, I can't believe that that's what's happening right now, right? So I'm like, George who? And he said, George Clinton. As it turned out, the band was out west somewhere. He jets back to Detroit to record. So I go to Detroit, and it's me, Bernie Worrell, Gary Scheider, Gary Cooper, and Tyrone Lampkin. He's the drummer at this point. So I'm going and we just playing some stuff. I played this kind of P-Funk medley that I did with Uncle Remus back at home. They're like, yeah, and I'm playing all the parts at once. Almost like classical guitar. I'm playing bass with my thumb. I'm playing like 2-finger chords in the middle, and then I'm playing a little melody. It was crazy. I had those kind of skills back then. I don't now. But so George is like, yeah, I like this. In fact, the very first song I recorded from, what was it? Mr. Melody Man. I think that's on that album as well, that Pleasure Principle album.
I think you're right. Yes.
Okay, that's the very first song I recorded. And then something just like you, which ended up going on the Brides of Funkenstein. So at any rate, George was like, yeah, I think I want you to play with the Brides. I'm like, who's that? So he explains it to me. this is before I played a note, right? So now, by the time I finish these sessions, he's like, no, I think I want you to play with Funkadelic. So I'll go back home, straighten out some business, and then I go to St. Louis. That's where I meet the band. So we're at the Checker Dome. That's one of those, those old school arenas, 20,000 seats, whatever. I can't believe this. Here I am, 20 years old. I'm standing here. We're at sound check, and I'm just kind of looking out. It was unbelievable. Needless to say, Boogie and I, that was not a match made in heaven, if you know what I mean. But okay, this tour ends. Boogie and I are sitting on a plane going home together. He's living in DC at the time. I'm living in Baltimore. And by the time that flight was over, we were the best of friends and remained friends, like the best of friends, until he passed. So yeah, you can talk anything out with anybody. You just have to give it a chance and be receptive to it. But to answer your question, Gary Mudbone Cooper, put me in touch with Grady, and through that, I met Gary Scheider, and he kind of pushed me through the P-Funk door. And,
wow.
As they say, the rest is history.
Yeah. So when you were on stage at that first show, I mean, how much of that do you even remember? It was probably just so much adrenaline. It's probably like a blur to some extent, right?
I tell you what I remember, and this is all that I remember. I was in there. There's nobody on stage. It's just me. The crew is not even. They kind of milling around. It's just me. So I go up. I stand on the edge of the stage, and I'm kind of looking around. And there's a mic. George's mic is right there. I walked up to the mic. I'm getting ready to say something. My lip touched it, and the whole place went dark. It didn't knock me off my feet, but it really knocked me for a loop. That's what I remember from that gig. That's all I remember. Getting the shock of life at the St. Louis Checker Dome.
Had you seen any of their shows before, just as a fan?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I saw them in fact, I used to go to a concert a week. Usually it was, like I said, rock groups, Humble Pie, Gentle Giant, stuff like that. But this particular time, it was Parliament Funk and Red Earth, Ohio Players, and Kool and the Gang. So,
It's quite a bill. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about it. And it was probably $5. If that. So I'm like, man, this is good. And they were killing. And Gary was, he wasn't that much older than me. So his voice was like pristine. In the midst of all this chaos, you got this dude. He's angelic, his voice. I couldn't, they all looking crazy, like stumbling over each other and absolutely killing. It was, and I was like, yeah, it was great. I mean, and Junie was there, who later came with us with P-Funk, and it was just great. And probably more than anything, that's when I made the turn to more funky stuff, from the rock stuff that I liked. I'm talking Peter Frampton was the guitarist, basically. Yeah. He did some vocals, but he was Humble Pie's guitarist. So that tells you how far back that was.
So was Glenn Goins with him at that point?
No, Glenn wasn't there yet. It was, Tiki. It was the whole, mishmash of people without Glenn, basically. I'm trying to I don't even think Debbie was there yet. Debbie Wright and Jeanette Washington, they weren't even there yet. So yeah, this was way back. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, well, Junie was still with the Ohio Players, so that'll give you an idea of the timeline.
Maybe 74 or something like that.
Yeah. I was still in high school. I graduated in 74, so Yeah. But yeah, it was great. And I said, that's what I want to do. And I try, and I was, I tried to steer the band. Okay, let's kind of slow it down and play some of these grooves and stuff. And that's kind of what led to, by the time Grady heard us, we were like in full funk mode. And that got me the gig with him, and which got me the gig with P-Funk. So
yeah. So when you got with P-Funk, you got thrown into sort of that assembly line right away, or how did that transpire?
Well, when I first started, George would say, it was me and Boogie and I, bass players. I want you to play this, you to play that, So the show was basically divided. Boogie would open it and close it, and I would play a bunch of stuff in the middle. And then, eventually Boogie moved over to guitar, and it was just me. And then, at some point, Lodge came in. Well, Lodge came in earlier than when he was playing bass. He was a vocalist. And then there came a point where, I kind of relinquished more and more. And then, circumstances led to me leaving, and that's when Lodge, took over, kind of. But I was never, there were only ever 2 bass players maximum when I played bass. It was either me and Boogie or me and Lodge.
In terms of the studio stuff, though, being sort of like an assembly line,
Yeah.
when and how did you get into that mix?
That's how I started. I started in the studio. And, my first day, I went from the airport to United Sound, probably cut maybe 6, 7 songs that day.
So also
Mr. Melody. Yeah. In fact, Worship Touchant, well, that was later, but I'm trying to, just like You is on there, isn't it?
Yes.
That was the second song that I recorded. Mr. Melody Man was the first. Just Like You was the second. And then there was a song that Mudbone wrote called Father Time. I don't know if that ever made it on a record, but it was kind of Beatle-ish. I helped him navigate those chords to make it less Beatle-ish, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I said, dude, you play 3 or 4 of those chords in a row, you're going to get sued. You know what I mean? So we kind of worked it out. And George, I was pretty aggressive, arrogant. I'm young, I'm arrogant. George liked that. You know what I'm saying? So, he and I were like friendly, like right away, because I had no fear. I was too young to be fearful. You know what I'm saying? If I'd been 30, I'm afraid of air. I don't know what to do. I'm scared I might jeopardize something. But at 20, you don't think like that. The world is your oyster when you're 20 years old. So, let's do this. Do it my way. Like, what? Who's this dude? And, and George just liked that about me, I guess. I still record with him to this day.
Did anyone give you any guidance on your parts, or
No.
did you just come up with your own?
Do your thing. That's what I was saying earlier. Even from, even from day one, it was like, hey, I think this dude might know his way around a bass. Just do your thing. And my thing happened to fit their thing. So, the only part I was given in a record ever in my whole career in P-Funk was the middle part of Worship Touchant. And Bernie Worrell gave me that part. But other than that, every part you ever hear me play is a part that I came up with.
Very impressive. So it's one thing to appear on a Brides or a Parlette record, but when you were on Parliament's record, it's like a whole different level, a whole nother thing. How did it feel to sort of, it's almost like graduating to the first string, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember, because I'm playing the title track of that, Motor Booty Affair. And I'm trying to remember what George said. He said, think of, it was some Casey and the Sunshine Band record. I can't remember which one it was, though. He said, think of that and kind of interpret that in your way. And that's where Motor Booty Affair came from. I can't remember the record to save my life, though. No, can't remember it. That was a long time ago.
I would never think of that association. That's something.
Of course not. You know, that's the Skeetization of Casey and the Sunshine Band. Yeah, he said, think of, let me try to hear the part. I can't make the connection, but yeah, that's what he told me. And that's how it came out. And I played another song, but it didn't make the cut. So, but that's the only song that I'm playing on that record is Motor Booty.
And you went out on this tour?
Yes.
That was quite a tour. I mean, next to the mothership, that was
underwater.
The most elaborate one they did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did every tour between 78, let's say, starting with the Flashlight tour, through 79, which was the Knee Deep tour. I did everything in there. I had to take a break. I didn't go on the tour at all in 1980. Came back in 1981 and 2. And then, of course, Atomic Dog in 1983. And then after that, 84. Then it's fuzzy after that because there was a period, there was a real down period in there in like the mid to late 80s.
Yeah. Yeah, it was depressing for me, but yeah.
You. Yeah.
So but that underwater tour show, I didn't get to see it in person, but I've seen video. Was that just wacky craziness? I mean, you're doing your own thing as always, but yeah, what was it? I mean, it was such a huge production.
Yeah, it was pretty big. We rehearsed. Where did we rehearse for that? I want to say Detroit. I know my first tour, the Flashlight tour, we rehearsed in Cincinnati. Motor Booty, I think, was Detroit. But yeah, we kind of, they staged it so you're not stepping because people have tails and it's all kinds of, like you say, all craziness everywhere. So basically, it was where not to step. You know what I'm saying? Do your thing, but don't step here during this song or there when this person walks across and that kind of thing. And stay out of the way of the fake aquarium. But to me, it looked cheesy from on stage. But then I saw a video of it, and then okay, I can see how this might look like an aquarium, but it didn't from my vantage point.
It was ambitious. You got to give it that.
Very, very, yes. Okay, what you got there? Oh, what am I playing on here? Who says a jazz band can't play funk or whatever it is?
Funk band can't play funk.
Yeah, that Groove Allegiance. And what else is on there?
Charlie's on there.
That's Bootsy. Can't remember. I know those two. Because Groove Allegiance, I kind of lost my mind on that one a little bit. Because what would happen to me? I would get kind of bored playing these parts, and I would just take a solo, like right in the middle. I said, hey, they can cut it out if they don't like it. And a lot of it stayed in, like the Parlette Pleasure Principle solo. That's what that was. I'm going, like wherever it seemed like. And then I just took a solo, and they kept it. But yeah, Groove Allegiance, that was, that was kind of the height of my jazz funkiness, I guess you could call it. That was that, excuse me, that and maybe Happy to Have Happiness on Your Side by Bernie Worrell. That was kind of,
Yeah, I can't hold that one up because it's on my wall back there. Autograph.
yeah.
Well, I could have taken it off the wall, but yeah, it's back.
No, don't do that.
This one.
Okay, Uncle Jam. What am I playing on there? I don't think I'm on that record.
Is that right?
I'm not. What's on that? Give me the rundown. I'll tell
Trick
you.
of the Week, Not Just Knee Deep, Uncle Jam's Army, Groove Maneuvers. There's only 5 tracks.
I think maybe Uncle Jam's Army, not the whole thing, like parts of it. Because some stuff I did, it was Bootsy had already done it, and I came in and overdubbed parts on it.
78 was an unbelievable. That was 79, but 78 was such an unbelievable year for the Funk Mob.
Yeah, I think I may have written a song on there. Oh, I Don't Think So. Is that on there?
Well, it's got another version of Mr. Melody Man. We Came to Funk You, Half a Man, Blow by Blow Backwards, Melody Man, Just Like You, Circular Motion.
Oh, okay. Maybe Circular Motion. I can't remember that one. I know one of those Horny Horn records. They did OI, a remake of OI on it.
Yeah, well, your name is on there.
Yeah, I think Circular Motion.
That one?
Party Up in Here. That's all I'm on in that one.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorites on there.
I also wrote that.
Very cool.
That's one of the rare records that Dennis and I played on together.
There you go.
I can't remember what's on there.
Glory Hell Stupid, Party People, Big Band Theory, Freeze.
Oh no, I wasn't in the band then. That's right.
Oh, is that right?
I was not. Yeah, I took a hiatus. I thought I was going to lose my mind. So
Kind of like Bootsy.
Yeah, right. No, nothing on there. Maybe what's on there? Maybe something.
Well, some of this was, old tracks that they took out. I know that because just had Daryl Dixon was on. He was talking about that he worked on one of these like a few years before. Crush It, Trombipulation, Long Way Around, Agony of Defeat.
I think maybe Long Way Around. I may have done something on that. Like I said, by this point, I would just go in the studio with George. It'd just be me and him. He'd have him pull up these tracks, and I would play along with whoever was on it, and he'd kind of cut stuff in and out. OI.
OI.
Yes, I wrote that one also. That's me and basically Parlette Band. Everybody else was on tour somewhere.
Do you remember, was this cut very far before the record came out or close to it?
I think it was pretty much in advance of it. It was a long time because I recorded that in 1980. I don't know when that came out.
81.
Yeah, so it was a year. I recorded that a good year before it came. Good pickup on your part. Because it was about a year before it came out.
So Skeet, all these incredible musicians and charismatic figures and stuff that were part of the organization at the time you were in it. Can you speak a little bit? Mm-hmm. You talked about how you and Boogie mended fences and you were best of friends. Can you talk a little bit about, your impression of Boots, your impression of George, of Bernie, maybe Mike Hampton?
Yeah. Bernie and I were really close. I used to just go up there and hang in playing field with him, stay at his house. We run around doing sessions and stuff. But yeah, Bernie and I were really close. Mike and I were roommates. He was my first roommate. I was young. He was never in the room, so I basically had a single room. But yeah, Mike and I were very close back in those days. Gary and I, I considered Gary to be like my brother. I really, really loved him. I had great admiration for him. And, I felt a closeness to him that I never realized until he passed. And, I went to the funeral. I went to the family funeral, the smaller one. I didn't go, they had a big one, but I went to the smaller one, and I actually spoke at it. And, that was, I never realized how close I was to him until that day. That's a hell of a time to realize that, but, things happen. George and I, we like each other, and we had a professional closeness, and I kind of looked up to him as not a mentor so much as like an uncle. I had no problem if I ever needed anything. I would go right to him. I'd cut through the red tape and go right to him, and he, 9 times out of 10 he would sort it out. But yeah, Glenn and I, we weren't in the band at the same time for very long, because I was in the band, I want to say October of 77. It was before my 21st birthday. So it couldn't have been October, so August, let's say. And when we were recording Warship Tucson, he walked in the studio at that point, and that's when I met him. And of course, they left, I want to say March, late February, early March of 78. So that's not very much time. He and Jerome and Daryl Dixon and, those guys. And that was, I looked at that, because I was feeling where they were coming from. But then I said, wait a minute, those guys are leaving this group no matter what happens. They've got deals. They are gone, right? And I'm thinking, I said, man, I know some horn players. I got Dennis. I'm like, man, I can probably, and by that time I had built up some, I had climbed up the pecking order a little bit. And I'm saying, yeah, I could probably get a few people in this band. And that was the Gregs, P-Funk horns, Greg and Benny, Dennis, Gary Hudge, all those people that came from Baltimore after me were a result of Daryl and Glenn and Jerome leaving. Not just Daryl, but the whole horn section. And that's how I met Maceo, as a matter of fact, because Maceo and Cush came in as on a temporary basis as the horn section to bridge the gap between Daryl and them leaving and P-Funk finding their own horn section, which ended up being Greg, and Benny. But that's when I met Maceo. So you're talking March of 78.